Another day, another unelected bureaucrat pushing forward some executive decision meant to curb your Second Amendment rights. Oh, but what's this? It's not the ATF director? Seems like a new challenger is approaching. I'm Ben, and you're watching the Minuteman Moment. But before we get into the video, I wanted to take a second to let you know about GOA's first convention, GOALS, the Gun Owners Advocacy and Leadership Summit. This first-of-its-kind event will be held August 17th to 18th in Knoxville, Tennessee. Come check out acres of booths from your favorite manufacturers and hear from the top voices of the Second Amendment. The best part? It's free for GOA members and there will be things for the whole family, kids included. I'll see you in Knoxville. Now on to the video. In the latest on how the Biden administration is trying to weaponize executive power against gun owners, we now have a doctor dressed as a general telling us there's a gun violence epidemic. The head of the Department of Health and Human Services, Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy, has decided to issue an advisory claiming that firearm violence is a public health crisis. Now this is all after in both 2014 and in 2021, the Surgeon General testified that he did not intend to use his office to push gun control.
You said in your advocacy for passage of gun control last year, tired of politicians playing politics with guns, putting lives at risk because they're scared of the NRA. To what extent do you intend to use the Surgeon General's office as a bully pulpit for gun control?
Thank you, Senator Alexander. So to start, I do not intend to use the Surgeon General's office as a bully pulpit for gun control. That is not going to be my priority. As we spoke about, my priority and focus is going to be on obesity prevention.
Do you think guns present a public health emergency?
Well, Senator, I think that gun violence, like any other form of violence, is a concern to me as a doctor who's taken care of many patients who have been the victims of violence. But I think the way we approach that issue, Senator, should be driven by science. I'm grateful that Congress has, on a bipartisan basis, put funds to study the origins of gun violence and how best to address it. But I'll tell you that my focus, Senator, is not on this issue. It is, and if I'm confirmed, it will be on COVID, on mental health, and on substance use disorders. These are the issues which I think are front and center in this moment. It's where I would put my attention.
What a liar. Now, if you lied to the Senate during your confirmation hearings, it should be an automatic grounds for impeachment and removal from office. Of course, in the new Surgeon General advisory, Vivek Murthy is repeating the anti-gun talking point that guns are the leading cause of death for children, while at the same time including 18 and 19-year-olds while excluding children under 1. Now I'm sure the US government would never include adult criminals being shot to skew the narrative in their favor.
What is especially devastating is how this has affected our children. Firearm violence has become the #1 cause of death among children and adolescents, more than car accidents or drug overdoses.
What the Surgeon General fails to mention is all of the instances that firearms are used to save lives. Even according to the same report that they quote from, 4% of Americans have discharged a firearm in self-defense. That's over 13.5 million Americans. In addition, the same report lists the top 3 things the Americans can do to protect themselves from gun violence. Can you guess what they are? First, discuss the rules of safe firearm ownership. Second, purchase self-defense tools. And third, practice shooting. And I cannot stress this enough. That's from the same report that the Surgeon General is using to justify calling gun violence a public health crisis. And while it's easy to laugh in the face of such a ridiculous declaration being peddled by the administration, it's important to note that in the past, a Surgeon General's advisory was partially responsible for a decline in cigarette usage and more regulations on the tobacco industry. Now, even though millions of Americans own firearms peacefully, and according to their own study, 13.5 million Americans have discharged a firearm in self-defense, the Biden administration still wants to push gun control. Here's the Surgeon General's recommended actions for this public health crisis. First, they want to implement universal background checks and make it harder for you to buy firearms. This, of course, means not only will the government have a purchase records of your firearms you buy, but also they want to make it even harder by forcing you to go through permit-to-purchase laws and additional steps to exercise your Second Amendment rights. Now, what's funny is that the Surgeon General wants to talk about the disparity of outcomes when many of these permit-to-purchase laws originated with Jim Crow laws in the South, with the goals of keeping minorities disarmed. Second, of course, they want to ban semi-automatic weapons. This includes military-style features and large-capacity magazines. The Surgeon General might want to look at California to see how well these laws are holding up, which is not at all. And finally, They want to create safer conditions in public places related to firearm use and carry. What this really means is they want to ban the right to carry a firearm in public. This is even crazier when you learn that concealed carry permit holders are less likely to commit any crime than even the police. Now, if you've been paying attention, this is nothing new. Last year, Governor Lujan Grisham of New Mexico decided to do the exact same thing by attempting to ban carry in the entire city of Albuquerque, even if you had a concealed carry permit, saying that her ban was justified because of a gun violence epidemic. She declared a public health crisis, allowing her to use her power as governor to tyrannically ban carry.
You took an oath to the Constitution. Isn't it unconstitutional to say you cannot exercise your carry license?
With one exception, and that is if there's an emergency, and I've declared an emergency for a temporary amount of time, I can invoke additional powers. No constitutional right, in my view, including my oath, is intended to be absolute.
But GOA didn't back down from these tyrants trying to use public health as a cover for pushing their anti-gun agenda. We filed a lawsuit and received a temporary restraining order against this unconstitutional action that would have infringed on the Second Amendment rights of New Mexicans to carry. Now, that lawsuit is still ongoing a year later, and we're fighting to make sure that no one's rights are infringed upon under the guise of public safety. But again, this isn't the first time we've dealt with that either. Back when everyone was hiding at home from microbes and wearing diapers on their face, the government made many attempts to use the crisis to infringe on your Second Amendment rights nationwide. GOA's legal team fought battles in Massachusetts and Virginia after state and local officials used the virus as an excuse to close down gun stores and ranges. In every case, GOA won a reversal of the shutdowns, prompting one anti-gun official to lament that our pro-gun victory was just awful. Our legal team also used those victories to bully other state and local officials into respecting the Second Amendment at the time. We also petitioned the Trump administration to declare the Second Amendment industry essential so that they could remain open. When Trump made the designation, it was super helpful for the firearm industry because it allowed them to stay open despite the lockdowns. Now, we've learned from all of that, so an idea for a new bill was born. Senator Braun and Representative Cloud wrote a GOA-backed bill to prevent the weaponization of a public health emergency against gun owners. The Protecting the Right to Keep and Bear Arms Act would have limited the ability of the Secretary of Health from declaring a public health emergency on gun violence, which would have led to a number of bad things, such as allowing the federal government to work with anti-gun local governments, deploying national disaster medical system teams around the country to work against gun violence, and bolster protections to preventing the Fed from deploying the military against gunners like they did in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina.
Police department! The police and National Guard going street by street, house to house.
We need to make sure, too, that whenever we knock on doors, people refuse to leave. We need to make note, call it in.
They say there are no orders to use force, just strong persuasion, sometimes entering open houses with guns drawn, and instructions to disarm anyone inside.
You say guns will be taken? No one will be able to be armed. We will take all weapons.
That happened today in this wealthy neighborhood where homeowners had armed themselves to protect their mansions. Residents were handcuffed on the ground. In the end, police took their weapons but let them stay in their homes.
They were a little bit threatened because our weapons were bigger than their weapons.
For many of the police and guard troops, it is an uncomfortable job to do this in an American city. This guard unit occupied a church, using it as a base camp. They had to leave a note because they could not get hold of the pastor to get permission.
It is surreal. Yeah, you never expect to do this in your own country.
Chris Montgomery says he'd rather be in Iraq than patrolling American neighborhoods.
Walking up and down these streets, you don't want to think about the stuff that you're going to have to do if somebody pops around the corner.
Be shooting in America.
Yeah.
If you want to learn more about that bill, be sure to check out the Minuteman moment we did on that in the past. I'll link it in the description. Now, Senator Braun tried to pass this bill 2 years ago, but the anti-gun Democrats in the Senate killed it. They wanted to keep their options open, because in a potential societal breakdown, we really have to worry about criminals not filling out the proper paperwork to buy guns from the gun shop. Senator Braun also tried to have it passed again as an amendment, but was shot down by anti-gunners saying that the government would never weaponize the public health emergencies against us. It's ridiculous that we have so many examples of GOA acting as the oracle and looking into the future and warning Congress about what the anti-gun side wants to do. This is exactly why we worked with Senator Braun and Representative Cloud to introduce that bill. But unfortunately, it hasn't made much progress since it was first introduced and is stuck in committee. This is where we need your help. We need you to call your congressman and demand that Speaker Johnson bring the Protecting the Right to Keep and Bear Arms Act by Representative Cloud to the floor and vote on it to stop the Biden administration's overreach against constitutional rights. Now, thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe to stay up to date with GOA's latest fights for your rights.